light within my heart, light within my thoughts, light within my words. May one and all and everything, blessed and loved ever be. Welcome. I am Sister Who. As much as I think the right to disagree may be one of our most important rights, and the right to disagree openly, I would like to also encourage that there be a lot of thought that goes into that. It's not just deciding what you're against, as it is deciding with what should we replace it. And if this doesn't work all that well, do we have something better to suggest? And I guess in that sense, we have to remember that humanity is an ongoing experience. There is nothing that exists at the present time that is to be the last word on the subject. Not on spirituality, not on science, not on anything. Science is a way of asking questions, but for people who expect science to be omnipotent, it's problematic because at some point science will reach its limits and it will have to be rewritten again. There was a point in human history when we did not know what quantum physics was. And there are a lot of things that happen within quantum physics that are completely different that people would not have believed before, would not have previously believed. Applying that to other areas, our understanding of spirituality continues to grow also. And to try to understand that reality is a multifaceted gem and not something in which different perspectives are mutually exclusive. Everyone has a perspective and everyone looks at a particular area of human life and human experience in a particular way. But without integrating all the other perspectives, one will never have a complete view of whatever it is. There is a perspective, for example, that sees and understands and knows the dark side of the moon. It's not something that we have ever seen. There is no light there. There's no, except for a satellite that's gone around the backside with a flashlight or something, there's no way of knowing what's there. And in a similar way, whether spirituality or whatever you want to call it, there are all sorts of other dimensions of being that we know nothing about. At some point we may discover them, we may even find ways to measure them. And at that point we begin to learn about them. The protest then is that anyone who claims to have all the answers, all the knowledge, this is the only method you will ever need for finding out what's true, that claim is inherently false, because there is always another way of looking at things and another way of being that we haven't even imagined yet. I'm reminded of a particular episode of Voyager where they encountered a race that was made of a particular kind of energy, so that they believed the only real being was the holographic doctor on the Star Trek Voyager. And the organic beings they did not see as being real forms of life. And so the doctor had to intercede and tell them what was needed without necessarily changing their belief about the nature of life. In a similar sort of way, life is defined a particular way on the planet Earth. If we go somewhere where life is defined differently, we will have to be open to that different way of being and expand our definition and expand our concept of language. Do we communicate by words, or do we also communicate by sounds? Do we communicate by gestures? All of these things offer new possibilities, and there are so many different ways of life existing that we haven't discovered yet. The point of protest is that yes, we should be able to protest, yes, we should be able to have dialogues and to disagree. We must, because science has limitations, theology has limitations, everything one can name has limitations. Human beings, because of their inherent need to grow, because we're always growing and because we're always learning, when we stop growing and we stop learning, we essentially reject or rebel against our inherent humanity. The person who is no longer fully human is the person for whom love does not exist, and innovation does not exist, and industrious does not exist, and growth and life do not exist. And I've met so many people who abandon their humanity in order to do their job according to the rules. In so doing, they take their humanity out of it, and there are a lot of situations to which they can no longer respond. It is our humanity that allows us to make something good, that allows us to take something bad and transform it, that allows us to take a situation where everything is lost and where we are losing, and to turn it around and to begin winning, and to find something in that situation upon which we can build, some way that we can grow and where we can become more than we are at this point. I recall the Star Trek movie entitled Nemesis, in which Captain Picard is trying not to be judgmental, and he meets someone who is actually a clone of himself, and keeps insisting that how can we judge them if we had gone through the same experience? That's who we would be. And the difference that Commander Data points out is that the difference between Shinzon and Captain Picard and between B4 and Data is that they do not aspire. The thing that makes them different is that they are growing and that they are becoming more than they are. And whether we're talking about science or theology or whatever, each of them needs to be growing and needs to be becoming. I show up as I am because it's what I find within myself. It's where I find the most integrity. If someone says that I have to look like everyone else and I can't, then I guess I would shrug and ask, so where's the extermination chamber? Because you're asking me something that is impossible for me to do. More preferably, instead of that, what we would have is a world where there can be growth and genuine life, because it's my humanity, my ingenuity, my ability to solve problems, my ability to creatively express something that may not have ever existed before. These are the things that allow me to encounter a new situation and transform it into something good. If I leave my humanity behind and expect the rules to solve my problems, there will be a lot of problems that go by unsolved. And there will be a lot of situations that I can't address. If I expect relationships to be no more than they have been, the patterns of relationships that have existed in the past are not able to deal with future challenges. The theological conceptions that existed in the past are not able to deal with future challenges. The science of 200 years ago is not able to deal with the things that we are discovering now. With all of that in mind, it comes at the heart of protest is that we protest anything that does not allow us to continue growing, that does not allow us to continue becoming something more than we are, more than what exists, more than what has been. If what exists is not meeting the need, it's time for us to get creative and inventive and bring our greatest humanity to it, so that whatever is created can embrace the principles of love and unconditional support and working together, and not taking a hierarchical perception of things that decides who is better and who is worth and who is more and who is lesser. And instead of saying better or worse, to instead say you are what you are and what you are is great. We just have to figure out how. We have to figure out what to do with who you are and what you can do. But without talking to that person, without listening to that person, you may never know what that person is able to do or what experiences they have had. The corollary to that is the numerous people I've met who are trying so hard to be what people expect that even what they have seen and done and accomplished gets marginalized and rather than integrated. And the more they try to be the embodiment of others' expectations, the less time they take to live their own lives. And if they never live their own lives, a whole lot of things will never get done. I imagine if Michelangelo never carved David, and if Beethoven never wrote his symphonies, they were busy with day jobs, or they were trying to be what everyone expected them to be instead of creating what only they could create. And yet, even at that point, the whole explanation breaks down, because Michelangelo describes himself as being a servant of the work, that he didn't carve David, he released him from the stone. And there have been so many situations in which, like the author Madeleine L'Engle has said, the artist creates more than they know, more than he or she knows. That the writer writes more than he knows, and the painter paints more than he knows, and the musician composes more than he knows, he or she. And in the final analysis, looks at the work and, kind of like Urkel on the show Family Matters, asks, did I do that? Because it is so incredible and so inspiring that when you create it, you look at it and you look at what your hands have made and wonder where it came from, and wonder, with all your possibly negative self-perception, to wonder if that could come through me. And my first published novel, I wrote the book. I spent 10 years writing it. The fascinating thing is that for having spent all that time writing it, I can go back and read it now, and I don't remember writing it. And I read a page and I find it inspiring and encouraging, and I wonder, where did that come from? Did I actually think of that when it didn't exist and write it down? And the way I usually describe it to people is that it's not that I decide what is going to happen or what the plot's going to be or how it's going to develop. I don't decide anything, really. I start writing and it's like a movie playing in my head. And I pay attention to my imagination and I write down whatever happens. And then when I have written it all down, I read it again and I wonder, where in the world did that come from? Because I didn't consciously think of it. It reminds me of the morning that I remember like it was yesterday, writing the last chapter of my novel. And what you find in the book is pretty much exactly what I wrote that morning. I really didn't change much of anything in it. That I woke up one morning and this movie started playing in my head, and I recognized it as part of my novel, so I ran to my word processor, because I didn't have a computer at the time even, and I typed it out on my word processor. And when I finished typing for an hour or so without stopping, I looked back at it and I thought, that's it. That's the final chapter of the book. I recognized it. I did not consciously intend to create it, but I recognized it. Going back to our original point of protest, that it's not that I define myself as an opposite. Somebody disagreed with me once when I described myself as being an anomaly. And they said, you're not an anomaly. And I said, well, yes, I am. And it's not that I'm trying to put myself down. It's recognizing that I'm not like anyone else I've known or any situation I've observed. And yet, to maintain a sense of integrity, I have to be myself. And very often in advance, I don't know what that is. But in the moment, only one thing seems right, and so I do it. And so when the moment of becoming Sister Who occurred, in the moment, only one thing seemed right, and that was to say yes. And so I said yes. And I stood up and I did it. And there have been so many protests at which I was the only one present within a particular grouping. Gay people, for example. For 4 years in a row, I participated in the 4th of July parade in a small mountain town. And I was the only obviously gay participant. Anyone else who was gay, who was in the parade, didn't make it clear that they were. And no matter how many times I invited my friends and acquaintances to join me, nobody ever did. And in the final analysis, I had to decide, am I going to do this or not? And I decided that even if no one walks with me, I have to walk in that parade. And so, and the final time I did, I carried the rainbow flag, representing gay and lesbian people, gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, the whole rainbow of people. And the local newspaper that was run by a couple of people who were completely non-judgmental, simply printed a photograph of me standing there with my rainbow flag in the parade and titled it Sister Who Celebrates Diversity. They had no judgment to offer. I thought it was wonderful, and I did want to celebrate diversity. I'm just disappointed that all of the other diverse people I knew could not find a sense of family to march with me. And if I found something to protest in terms of the way society was marginalizing anyone who's different and pushing us out of the limelight and trying to deny any recognition, that was a protest, I suppose, in a way. And yet, to do this protest, I had to be continually thinking about, yes, but what does it mean? I don't want to be defined only by what I'm against. I also want to be defined by what I'm for. And if I don't even know what I'm for, if I don't even know that to which I'm committed, then I haven't completed the action of protest. Because protest is not just about saying no. Protest is about saying instead. Instead of that, do this. Instead of murder, have people live in peace. Instead of domestic violence, have people learn about relationships. Instead of narcissistic or selfish behavior, have people who embrace what I call relational individuality. I am completely an individual, and I exist in relationship to everything around me. And I want to nurture those relationships to be distinctly positive rather than negative. I am who I am, and I've thought about it enough to know who I am, at least to some degree. But part of knowing who I am is knowing that I'm always growing. And if I'm protesting something, if I'm disagreeing with something, to have thought about it enough to know what I would recommend in its place. That this is not just about saying, this is bad, this is wrong, this is stop, and this is not a Christian cross, this is an intersection. When I come to an intersection, deciding at that point which way we're going to move, and who am I going to be, and how am I going to live. That's the question I keep coming back to over and over again, and it seems like every philosophical system, every spiritual system comes back to the same question. How should we then live? Considering this, how should we then live? And there is so much living to be done, and so much to be discovered, and so much to be learned, that it seems to me life should be a very exciting place, and instead it's a place of so much conflict. People who don't want to be challenged to grow because they're content with everything just the way it is. And I would be the first to suggest that you can't have it just the way it is. Even if you try to stand in place, your body is going to age and break down, and things will continually change. As Hippolytus, the old Athenian ancient Greek philosopher, said, change is the only constant in the universe. That idea has been with us for thousands of years. And yet still people are trying to create situations in which nothing changes. Or at least they hope that nothing changes. But of course everything does, because we learn and we grow, and we have to, the Murphy's Law for computer operators, I decided, was that there is no computer system so perfect that once you get it all configured and all arranged and all ordered, that you won't get a notice in the mail that another update is coming. And you'll have to do it all over again. I think too many people are outraged by negative behavior, and I am too. But I still have to take the time to think about, what do I do instead? And if this is wrong, what is it about it that's wrong? Is it, and I asked a friend about this the other day when she was talking about a particular politician who was running for office and went to a closed down building where no campaigning was allowed, and because it was municipal affairs that were going on. And the person basically had to be reported because, and I said, so was it that they were doing that? No. Was it that they were doing this? No. Was it? And finally, what we arrived at as a conclusive end, what she did wrong, this particular candidate, was that she lied and misrepresented what she was in the building for. She said she was here to do this, and she did something else instead. And because of that lie, she had to be escorted out of the building and told that this is not acceptable. And what exactly what happened, I don't know. Whether my assumption is that they escorted her out of the building. I don't know if she was also fined or what. But in deconstructing what is really going on and what the real objection is, frequently, if not always, it goes beyond categories and looks to an individual, to a specific behavior, to a basic ethical quality, like they lied or they did something that hurt someone. And we need to find a way for them to get their needs met without hurting other people. Saying, I want to protest is great, but it's only the beginning. It's never where the discussion should end. The problem I ran into in one parade I was in at one point was that there was someone protesting they were protesting in the vague sense of the word. And somebody asked me to address them, and I kind of didn't see it as productive, but I didn't want to say no, so I kind of said, well, I can try to offer something, but I don't think they're going to hear it. The problem was they were protesting my existence. They were not protesting the action that was happening. And by protesting, it would be like protesting the existence of platypi in Australia. They didn't need anyone's permission to exist. No one needed someone's permission to be a composer or an artist or teacher or whatever it was that they chose to be. They found that aptitude and the opportunity within themselves, and they pursued it by their own choice. They didn't need anyone's permission. I guess as you contemplate protest, one of the things inherent in that is this whole thing of permission. That if you have to protest, it's because someone didn't notice some of the details that you did. And yet, to say that they need permission to protest, they need permission to disagree, suggests that the people in authority, the dominant population, whoever it was that decided things will be this way, that group needs to come to terms with how they have become narcissistic and aren't listening anymore. The reason we're protesting is because we said it in a calm voice and you didn't hear us. The beginning of protest, therefore, is not yelling or throwing or marching, but listening. And in listening to find out what has already been tried and why things aren't working at the present time, to instead notice what's not working, to listen, to have that dialogue, and then to move from there into, why don't we try it this way instead? I think this might work. And to have thought it through enough that we're asserting why it won't work. In thinking things through, to think of what the pieces are, what their relationship to each other is, and from that to begin to discern how can it be done even better, and to put forth that new idea so that you're giving somewhere for humanity to grow, some direction for the individual or the person to grow, rather than leaving them right where they are and just saying, I don't like that, I don't like you, I don't like the situation. Fine, we've noted that you don't like it, but that doesn't solve anything. We need to continue this discussion enough to begin figuring out what is it about this situation that you don't like, and how could we do it in a way that we didn't cause that circumstance or that characteristic, so that if someone says they don't like dogs, and really what they don't like is dogs running loose, well, then we'll put a fence around the yard and the dog won't run loose. So then you have no problem with me owning a dog as long as I don't let the dog run loose. Well, that could be the solution, but you don't find that out without talking to the people and you respecting them and they respecting you, and instead saying you're going to do it my way, or them saying you're going to do it my way, to instead say we're going to find a way that works for both of us, because you belong to the human species, and because of that it's imperative that I allow you to belong to the overall experience of my life. And I only have so many days, so many minutes, so many years to live. And I thank you for being part of my life, for caring enough to be present. And I want to get to know you better if that's something you're open to. And I want to see where a collaboration between us could go that neither of us could accomplish on our own. In any case, I hope that the thoughts of the last half hour have been helpful to you. Thank you very much for watching.